This video is about horror comic books that feature alluring females in scary situations. Specifically, those that were published during the golden age of comic books, which was from 1938 to 1954. Comic book covers of comic book titles that had especially creative and vibrant art are presented, in chronological order, from 1947 to 1954. These comic book titles, in order of first appearance in this video, are Eerie Comics, published by Avon, which was a one-shot comic in 1947, Ghost Comics, published by Fiction House, which ran for 11 issues from 1951 to 1954, Eerie, published by Avon, which ran for 17 issues from 1951 to 1954. Avon Publications, Inc. was an independent publisher from 1941 to 1959 when it was bought by the Hearst Corporation. Fiction House was a publisher of pulp magazines and comic books that existed from the 1920s to the 1950s. In the U.S. market, horror comic books reached a peak in the late 1940s through the mid-1950s, when concern over content and the imposition of the self-censorship Comics Code Authority contributed to the demise of many titles and the toning down of others. After this, from the mid-1960s to the early 1980s, horror comics flourished as black and white horror comic magazines, which did not fall under the code. In the 1970s, mainstream color comics experienced a resurgence in horror as the code loosened, and horror comics have continued on since then. Precursors to horror comics include detective and crime comics that had some horror in them, plus some superhero stories that included the likes of ghouls and vampires. Individual horror stories appeared as early as 1940. The first dedicated horror comic books appear to be Gilberton Publications' Classic Comics number 14 in 1943, with its full-length adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Avon's anthology Eerie No. 1 in 1947, which was the first horror comic with original content, and is also the first comic book cover in this video. Before comics, horror was featured in pulp magazines as the horror subgenre Weird Menace, which featured sadistic villains and graphic scenes of torture and brutality. Graphic portrayal of horror stories can be traced back to at least the 12th century and the Japanese scroll of hungry ghosts. For information about the video, see the video description section. Please like and subscribe.